In a crowded subway station in downtown Manhattan, what began as routine harassment erupted into one of the most remarkable tales of redemption when the Knight Riders motorcycle gang thought they'd found an easy mark in a uniformed soldier. They never expected to encounter Staff Sergeant David Torres, an elite Marine Corps combat instructor who was about to teach them that true power lies not in intimidation, but in transformation. This is the extraordinary story of how one veteran turned 7 violent offenders into champions of healing, proving that sometimes the most powerful victories don't end with defeat. They begin with understanding. Captured on station cameras and witnessed by dozens, this moment sparked a revolution of peace, transforming a subway station confrontation into a movement of hope. Watch as discipline defeats aggression, wisdom overcomes hatred, and 7 lives change forever when they discovered who they chose to fight, and more importantly, who chose to help them fight their own demons instead. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. Staff Sergeant David Torres stood at the top of the subway stairs, letting the cool evening air wash over his face. His olive dress uniform remained crisp despite the 18-hour flight from Iraq, every ribbon and badge perfectly aligned. The familiar scent of the city, hot dogs from street vendors, exhaust fumes, and the distinct underground station smell brought back memories of simpler times. Checking his watch, 9:45 p.m. David adjusted his military backpack. Inside was a small gift for his mother, a handcrafted silver necklace he'd found in a Baghdad market. She didn't know he was coming home early. After his father's funeral 3 months ago, he'd pulled strings to get his deployment shortened. The Marine Corps had understood. A widow needed her son more than they needed another combat instructor right now. The station was quieter than usual for a Thursday night. A few late-shift workers hurried past, eyes glued to their phones. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the tiled walls. David's combat-trained eyes automatically scanned the environment. Old habits die hard after 3 tours and 10 years of training elite units. Near the station's north exit, he spotted them. 7 men in leather vests, motorcycles parked illegally above ground, passing around what looked like a whiskey bottle wrapped in paper. The patches on their vests identified them as the Knight Riders, a gang known for causing trouble in this part of the city. An elderly couple approached the exit, then stopped abruptly. The woman clutched her husband's arm as they turned around, seeking another way out. David slowed his pace, watching as a young woman with shopping bags hurried past the bikers. One of them, wearing a vest covered in skull patches, made a crude gesture behind her back. David could have taken another exit. It would have been easier, smarter even. But that wasn't what his father had taught him. That wasn't what he taught his own combat students. The easy path and the right path, he'd tell them, rarely lead to the same place. The largest of the bikers, standing about 6'3" with a scraggly beard and a bandana, noticed David watching. He nudged his friends, pointing at the uniform. Even from this distance, David could read the man's lips as he made a mocking comment about playing soldier. David maintained his steady pace, his mind automatically cataloging details. The leader, clearly drunk but still coordinated. 2 by the wall, both with their hands in their pockets, possible weapons. 1 sitting on a bench, trying to look casual while watching the stairs. 3 more spread out in a loose semicircle, a poor attempt at tactical positioning. Well, what do we have here? The leader's voice echoed across the station as David approached. Look, boys, a real-life hero gracing us with his presence. The sarcasm dripped from every word. David stopped at a calculated distance, close enough to show he wasn't intimidated, far enough to maintain tactical advantage. Evening, gentlemen. Nice night for a ride. His voice remained professional, steady. The leader took a swig from his bottle, then deliberately stepped into David's path. You know what I think about soldiers, boys? He turned to his gang, encouraging their laughter. I think they're all just playing dress-up, trying to look tough in their little uniforms. David noticed how the other passengers had pressed themselves against the far wall, phones raised. The transit worker who had been mopping nearby had disappeared, probably calling security. Good. Having witnesses could make this easier, or harder, depending on how it played out. No need for trouble, David said calmly. We can all go our separate ways. The leader's eyes narrowed as he looked at David's name tag and rank insignia. A mean smile spread across his face. Staff Sergeant Torres, huh? What's the matter, Staff Sergeant? Too good to hang out with some real men? David's mind flashed back to his last training session in Iraq, teaching young Marines how to handle multiple opponents. The biggest mistake they'll make, he told them, is thinking numbers equal advantage. One disciplined fighter against 10 angry amateurs? I'll bet on discipline every time. The biker with the skull patches moved closer, pulling out a smartphone. Maybe we should make a video, show everyone what a tough guy looks like when he's crying. David shifted his weight slightly, settling his backpack more comfortably. His mother's gift was well padded. It would survive what was coming. He'd learned long ago that the moments before a fight were crucial. They often determined not just how things would end, but more importantly, how far things would have to go before they ended. Last chance, David said quietly, his voice carrying that unique tone of command that only comes from years of military service. Walk away now, and we all go home without paperwork. The leader's face flushed red with anger or alcohol, probably both. Nobody tells us to walk away. He reached for David's uniform. Time to teach you some respect, soldier boy. Time seemed to slow down, just as it always did for David in moments like this. As the biker's hand came toward him, David could see everything clearly. The poor balance, the telegraphed movement, the openings in their formation. These men were used to intimidating civilians, not facing someone trained to handle multiple armed insurgents. What happened next would change not just this night, but the lives of everyone involved. Sometimes, David thought, the most important battles aren't the ones you fight. They're the ones you find a way not to fight. The security camera blinked its red light steadily, about to record something these bikers never expected. A lesson in true strength and the beginning of an unlikely brotherhood. The biker's hand never reached David's uniform. With a movement so smooth it looked almost casual, David stepped slightly to the left, letting the leader's momentum carry him forward into empty air. The man stumbled, his face registering shock as his target seemed to simply disappear from where he'd been standing. What the? The leader caught his balance, turning with rage in his eyes. Get him! Two of the bikers rushed forward while the others spread out, trying to surround David. To the observers pressed against the station wall, it might have looked like a well-coordinated attack. To David, it was textbook example of exactly what not to do. You're making a mistake, David said calmly, his hands still relaxed at his sides. His eyes tracked every movement, noting how the skull-patched biker was reaching into his leather jacket. The familiar outline of a knife handle was visible for a moment. Some part of David's mind registered disappointment. He'd hoped to resolve this without weapons getting involved. The first biker reached him, throwing a wild haymaker that would have looked impressive in a bar fight. David simply wasn't there when the punch arrived. The second attacker met similar frustration, his kick hitting nothing but air as David seemed to flow between their attacks like water. Stand still, you! The leader's curse was cut short as he watched his two friends nearly collide with each other. The remaining bikers hesitated, suddenly less certain about their numerical advantage. That's when the skull-patched biker pulled his knife, the blade clicking open in the fluorescent light. A woman waiting for the train screamed, and several passengers rushed toward the exits. 5 against 1 wasn't enough? David's voice carried a hint of disappointment. You needed a weapon too? He set his backpack carefully against the wall, never taking his eyes off the group. His movements were precise, unhurried, showing years of combat experience. The knife wielder grinned, showing gold-capped teeth. Not so tough now, are you, soldier boy? He moved forward, blade extended, while 2 others tried to flank David. Time slowed down again for David. He saw everything with crystal clarity, the knife's trajectory, the poor balance of his attackers, their obvious lack of real combat training. These were men used to intimidating the weak, not facing someone who trained special forces in hand-to-hand combat. The knife came in a wild slash. David stepped inside the attack, his left hand catching the biker's wrist while his right forearm came up to trap the arm. One smooth twist, and the knife clattered to the floor as its wielder let out a yelp of pain. Before anyone could react, David used the man's momentum to spin him around, creating a human shield between himself and the other attackers. "Drop him," the leader shouted, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. This wasn't going according to plan. The biker in David's hold struggled but found himself unable to break free from the precise joint lock. Two more rushed forward to help their friend. David waited until the last second, then simply guided his captured opponent into them. All three crashed together, leather jackets squeaking against the tiles as they tried to untangle themselves. The leader and his remaining friends split up, trying to attack from different sides. It was a better strategy than their previous attempts, but David had trained for situations far worse than this. His breathing remained steady, just like he taught his students. Having second thoughts, David asked calmly, shifting his stance to keep both attackers in view. Sweat was starting to show through the leader's bandana, and his friends' hands were shaking slightly. They were beginning to realize this wasn't their usual kind of fight. In the distance, David could hear police sirens approaching. The transit worker had obviously called for backup, but David knew this needed to end before they arrived. These men had made a mistake, but they didn't deserve to have their lives ruined over it. The leader threw a heavy punch aimed at David's face. David deflected it with his forearm, a basic move he'd taught hundreds of times. The biker's fist hit nothing but air, and the force of his own punch threw him off balance. Before he could recover, David stepped forward and used a simple wrist lock to guide him face down onto the floor. The last standing biker backed away, his earlier confidence completely gone. He looked at his friends, one nursing a twisted wrist, three tangled on the floor, and now his leader was pinned down by a soldier who hadn't even broken a sweat. "Stay back," the fallen leader shouted, his voice muffled against the floor. David had him secured with minimal pressure, enough to hold him but not enough to cause pain. It was the same hold he demonstrated countless times in training sessions. The biker with the skull tattoo had managed to get back on his feet. He looked at his knife lying several feet away on the floor, then at David. The soldier's calm expression told him that trying to reach for the weapon would be a very poor decision. "Listen carefully," David said, his voice clear and professional. "I'm going to let your friend up now. When I do, you're all going to walk away. No one's seriously hurt, and we can keep it that way." He spoke with the authority of someone used to giving orders that were followed. The subway station had gone quiet except for the heavy breathing of the bikers and the murmur of the gathering crowd. Another train was approaching in the distance, its rumble growing louder. The biker leader had stopped struggling, his face a mix of anger and embarrassment pressed against the cold tile floor. For the first time that night, he seemed to be actually thinking instead of just reacting. That's when a new voice echoed through the station. "Transit police! Everyone freeze!" Two transit police officers came down the stairs, their badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Behind them stood a tall woman in a sergeant's uniform, Maria Ramirez, her calculating eyes taking in the scene before her. David slowly released the leader, stepping back to give him space to get up. The man rose shakily, his face a mix of anger and embarrassment. His bandana had come loose, revealing a long scar above his right eye. "He attacked us," the leader shouted, but his voice cracked slightly. The other bikers, now all back on their feet, nodded in agreement, though none of them could quite meet Sergeant Ramirez's gaze. Ramirez looked from the knife on the floor to the cell phones in the crowd still recording everything, then to David's perfectly pressed uniform. A slight smile crossed her face as she noticed his combat instructor badge. "Staff Sergeant," she said, her own military background evident in her bearing. "Mind telling me what happened here?" Before David could answer, a man in civilian clothes came down the stairs. Master Sergeant James Peterson, now working with the police department's training division, immediately recognized his former student. "David Torres?" Peterson's voice carried across the station. "I should have known it was you when they called about a soldier handling 7 attackers without throwing a single punch." The bikers' faces changed as this information sank in. The leader's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water as Peterson continued. "Gentlemen, Do you know who you just tried to fight? This is Staff Sergeant Torres, one of our top hand-to-hand combat instructors. He's trained over 300 Special Forces operators in close-quarters combat. The biker with the skull tattoo was still rubbing his wrist, while the others tried to straighten their leather jackets and recover some dignity. Their tough guy image had been completely shattered. Last month, Peterson added, clearly enjoying the moment, he disarmed 3 armed insurgents in Baghdad without firing a shot. He's who we send to teach Navy SEALs how to fight. A young woman in the crowd gasped. That's why he moved so fast. Sergeant Ramirez picked up the knife, examining it carefully. So, let me get this straight, she said, her voice stern but professional. 7 of you decided to harass a decorated combat instructor, pulled a knife on him, and he still managed to subdue you without causing any serious injuries? The leader, who had finally introduced himself as Jake Razor Mitchell, stared at the floor. His earlier bravado had evaporated completely. We didn't know, he mumbled. David spoke up for the first time since the police arrived. They made a mistake, Sergeant, but no one's hurt, and I don't think they'll be making the same mistake again. Ramirez shared a look with Peterson, then turned back to the bikers. You know, we could press charges. Assault, attempted assault with a weapon, harassment. You'd be looking at serious time. The bikers tensed, but Ramirez wasn't finished. Or, she continued, given Staff Sergeant Torres's remarkable restraint and the fact that no one was seriously injured, maybe we handle this differently. Even David turned to listen, curious about what she had in mind. The VA hospital down the street has a program that needs volunteers. They're always looking for people who know their way around motorcycles. Veterans learning to ride again after injuries, bikes that need maintenance, that sort of thing. Peterson nodded approvingly. 30 hours each of community service would be a good way to make amends. Plus, you might learn something about the men and women who serve our country. The bikers looked up hopefully. Razor glanced at his friends, then at David. For the first time that evening, real emotion showed in his face. We're sorry, he said, his voice genuine. We were way out of line. David nodded, accepting the apology with the same calm professionalism he'd shown throughout the entire incident. Sometimes, David said quietly, we all need someone to show us a better path. The subway station was returning to normal. New passengers arrived for the next train, though many were still sneaking photos of the scene. Peterson checked his watch. David, why don't I give you a ride home? Your mother's probably wondering where you are. As David retrieved his backpack, he took one last look at the bikers. They were signing papers for their community service agreement, looking like completely different people from the troublemakers who had tried to intimidate him earlier. A young girl tugged on her mother's sleeve, pointing at David. Mom, is he a superhero? No, sweetheart, her mother replied, smiling. He's something better. He's a soldier who knows that the greatest victory isn't defeating an enemy, it's turning them into friends. David smiled at the exchange, thinking of his father. The old Marine would have approved of how this turned out. Sometimes the best way to honor a warrior's memory isn't by fighting. It's by showing others how to stop fighting. The VA hospital's motorcycle workshop looked nothing like what the night riders had expected. Bright morning sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating a space filled with tools, bike parts, and most surprisingly, laughter. Veterans of various ages worked on motorcycles, some adapted with special controls for riders missing limbs. Razor, still wearing his leather vest but now minus the more aggressive patches, stood awkwardly with his gang members. Their usual swagger was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar sense of uncertainty. Dr. Sarah Chen, the program director, studied the group with knowing eyes. Welcome to Project Ride Again, gentlemen. I understand you'll be with us for 30 hours. Look, Razor started, his voice less confident than usual. We don't need a 1972 Harley Sportster, Dr. Chen interrupted, pointing to a rusted motorcycle in the corner. Belonged to a Marine who lost both legs in Iraq. His dying wish was for it to help other veterans. Think you can bring it back to life? The biker with the skull tattoo, who everyone now knew as Joey, moved closer to the bike, his expert eyes assessing the challenge. Tanks salvageable. Frames solid. Yeah, we could... He caught himself, remembering where he was. Good, Dr. Chen smiled. Because your first project just rolled in. The workshop door opened, and a young man in a wheelchair entered. Miguel Rodriguez, 25, his left leg missing above the knee, wore a Marine Corps t-shirt and a wary expression. These the guys? Miguel asked Dr. Chen, eyeing the bikers suspiciously. Best mechanics in the city, I'm told, she replied. Unless you'd rather wait 6 months for the regular service center. Miguel wheeled closer to the Sportster. My grandfather had one of these. Always wanted to ride it, but he never let me near it. Said I had to earn it. Razor found himself stepping forward. These bikes, they're tricky to modify, but with the right adjustments. He paused, surprised by the genuine interest in Miguel's eyes. You know how to adapt them? Miguel asked. Been working on bikes since I was 12, Razor replied. Never done adaptive controls, but principles are the same. It's all about understanding what the rider needs. Dr. Chen watched the exchange with satisfaction. Well, gentlemen, looks like you've found your first project. Miguel needs to be riding by the Veterans Day Parade. Think you can handle that? The other bikers had gravitated toward the motorcycle, their expertise already assessing the challenges and solutions. The defensive postures began to fade as they slipped into familiar technical discussions. Joey pointed to the controls. We could relocate everything to hand operation. Custom lever system. He turned to Miguel. How's your upper body strength? 4 hours of wheelchair basketball every week. Miguel grinned. Try me. The ice was breaking, but Dr. Chen wasn't finished. She led them through the workshop, introducing other veterans and their projects. A former Army sergeant with PTSD who found peace in engine repair. A Navy corpsman learning to ride again after losing an arm. Each story, each project, began to paint a different picture of strength than what the bikers had known. By mid-morning, leather vests were draped over chairs as the night riders rolled up their sleeves, immersing themselves in the work. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was beginning. Hey, Doc, Razor called out, wiping grease from his hands. 30 hours might not be enough. This bike, it needs more than just repairs. Is that your professional opinion? Dr. Chen asked. No, it's... Razor struggled with the words. It's just... feels right to do it proper, you know? Miguel watched the exchange from his wheelchair, a knowing smile on his face. He'd seen this before. How working on bikes could change people, give them purpose. The morning stretched into afternoon. The bikers found themselves sharing lunch with veterans, swapping stories about engines and roads traveled. The tough guy acts fell away, replaced by genuine exchanges of knowledge and experience. Late in the day, David stopped by to check on their progress. He found Razor and Miguel deep in discussion about custom handlebar modifications, while Joey was teaching a young veteran the finer points of carburetor adjustment. Looks like you found your element, David observed. Razor straightened up, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Sergeant Torres, about last night. Last night's past, David cut him off. What matters is what you do next. The biker leader nodded, looking around the workshop. You know, we always thought we were tough guys, but these vets, the things they've overcome. Strength comes in many forms, David replied. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is help someone else find their strength. As the day wound down, Dr. Chen gathered everyone around. Gentlemen, your 30 hours of service can end when you think you've paid your debt. But remember this, every bike you fix, every veteran you help back on the road, that's not just community service, that's changing lives. The night riders exchanged looks. Something had shifted during those hours in the workshop. The anger and aggression that had driven them to confront David seemed distant now, replaced by something they hadn't expected to find: purpose. 1 week into their service, the workshop had become more than just a punishment for the night riders. The sound of tools and easy conversation filled the air as Razor worked alongside Miguel, carefully adjusting the new hand controls on the Sportster. "Try it now," Razor said, stepping back from the bike. Miguel wheeled forward, reaching for the modified controls. His face lit up as everything aligned perfectly with his grip. "Man, this is something else," Miguel said, testing the resistance. "You really know your stuff." Joey, who had removed his skull bandana and now wore a VA volunteer cap, was showing a group of veterans the basics of engine maintenance. His gruff exterior had softened, especially when working with the younger vets who reminded him of his brother. "See, most people overthink it," Joey explained, pointing to the engine components. "But bikes are like people. Treat them with respect, understand their needs, they'll never let you down." Dr. Chen watched from her office, making notes. What had started as community service was evolving into something unexpected. The bikers' expertise, combined with their growing understanding of the veterans' challenges, was creating remarkable results. The workshop door opened, and David entered with Sergeant Ramirez. They found a scene very different from what they'd expected. The former troublemakers were fully engaged, teaching, learning, and working with genuine enthusiasm. "Hard to believe these are the same guys from the subway," Ramirez remarked quietly. A young veteran in his 20s, both arms scarred from an IED blast, was laughing at something Joey had said. The sound echoed through the workshop, genuine, unforced laughter that spoke of healing. "Sometimes people just need the right opportunity," David replied. "They had the skills all along. They just needed a better way to use them." Razor approached them, wiping grease from his hands. The change in him was the most dramatic. The aggressive posture was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that came from knowing his worth. "Sergeant Torres, good timing. We've got something to show you." He led them to where Miguel sat proudly beside the Sportster. "First test run today. Miguel's going to be ready for that parade with time to spare." The motorcycle had been transformed. Beyond the adaptive controls, the entire bike gleamed with careful restoration. But more than that, it had been customized with subtle Marine Corps details, a testament to Miguel's service. "This is way beyond 30 hours of work," Ramirez observed. Razor shrugged. "Hours stopped mattering after the first day. This isn't about paying a debt anymore. This is about—" He gestured around the workshop, searching for words. "Brotherhood," Miguel finished for him. "These guys, they don't just fix bikes. They get it. They understand what it means to need something to believe in." David noticed how the other night riders had gathered around, their body language completely different from that night in the subway. There was pride in their stance now, but not the artificial kind they'd hidden behind before. "We've been thinking," Razor said, looking at his friends for confirmation. "The VA's got a waiting list of vets who need their bikes modified. We want to help, not just for 30 hours, for as long as they need us." Dr. Chen had joined them, carrying a folder. "Actually, I have a proposal about that. The hospital's been looking to expand this program. We need full-time instructors, people who can teach both mechanics and understanding, people who know how to connect with others who might be feeling lost." The implications hung in the air. This wasn't just about community service anymore. This was about transformation, not just of bikes, but of lives. "You're offering us jobs?" Joey asked, disbelief in his voice. "I'm offering you a chance to continue what you've already started," Dr. Chen replied. "Look around. Look at what you've accomplished in just a week. Imagine what you could do with real resources, real support." The night riders looked at each other, then at the veterans they'd been working with. The choice was written on their faces before anyone spoke. "The Night Riders was about trying to prove something," Razor said slowly. "Maybe it's time for a new name, a new purpose." Miguel wheeled forward. "Road Warriors," he suggested, "but not about fighting, about coming together, helping others find their way back to the road." David watched as the moment sank in. This was how real change happened, not through force, but through understanding. Not through punishment, but through purpose. "One condition," Dr. Chen added with a smile. Those leather vests? They need new patches, ones that show who you really are now. 2 weeks after the subway incident, the workshop had undergone a complete transformation. The walls, once bare, now displayed photos of veterans with their restored bikes. The Night Riders' old patches hung in a frame, a reminder of how far they'd come. Razor stood before a group of new veterans, his leather vest now sporting a different patch. Road Warriors, strength through service. Behind him, Joey was teaching a wheelchair-bound Army veteran the intricacies of their latest adaptive control system. Each bike is different, Razor explained to his audience. Just like each of your stories is different. Our job isn't just to fix machines, it's to understand what you need to ride again. See, if we adjust the gyroscopic balance here, Chris explained to a group of visiting VA engineers, it compensates for riders with limited upper body strength. His eyes shone with enthusiasm as he demonstrated the system he'd developed. The door swung open and a group of rough-looking bikers entered, members of the Steel Wolves, another gang known for causing trouble. But today they came with a different purpose. We heard about what you're doing here, their leader said, addressing Razor. Word on the street is you're changing lives. Razor exchanged looks with David, who nodded slightly. Want the tour? Razor asked, remembering his own first day. As they walked through the workshop, they passed Miguel teaching a double amputee how to use the new control system. The veteran's face lit up as he successfully started and controlled the bike for the first time in 3 years. That's what it's about, Razor explained to the visiting bikers. Not about being tough, about making a difference. The Steel Wolves watched in silence as Joey demonstrated their latest adaptation, a sidecar system that could secure a wheelchair, allowing disabled veterans to ride with their families. We've got skills, one of the Steel Wolves said quietly. Maybe we could. Show up tomorrow at 9, Razor replied. Bring your tools and leave your attitudes at home. There's plenty of work to go around. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen was meeting with hospital administrators and potential sponsors. The program's success had attracted attention from motorcycle manufacturers interested in developing adaptive technology. Harley-Davidson wants to send their engineering team, she told David and Razor. They're interested in mass-producing some of your designs. The implications were huge. What had started in a subway confrontation was evolving into something that could help disabled riders nationwide. Later that afternoon, preparations for the Veterans Day parade were in full swing. 20 restored bikes lined the workshop, each adapted to its rider's specific needs. The Road Warriors worked alongside their new apprentices, putting final touches on paint jobs and chrome. Remember when we thought 30 hours was a long time? Joey laughed, helping a veteran polish his newly restored Indian motorcycle. Chris looked up from the control system he was adjusting. Hard to believe you guys were the same ones from that subway video. The room went quiet. Nobody had mentioned that night in weeks. That video, Razor said thoughtfully, might be the best thing that ever happened to us. Showed us who we really could be. David, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. The parade committee called. They want you guys in full Road Warriors gear, leading the motorcycle formation. The former Night Riders looked at each other, pride mixing with humility in their expressions. There's more, David continued. They want you to carry the American flag. Miguel will ride point, showing what this program's really about. Miguel wheeled over, grinning. Hope you guys are ready for some attention. News crews are coming from all over to cover this. It's not about attention anymore, Razor replied, looking around at what they'd built. It's about showing others what's possible, about proving that anyone can change if they're given the right chance. The workshop filled with the sound of engines as veterans tested their bikes. Each successful start, each smile on a rider's face, reinforced what the Road Warriors had learned. True strength isn't about intimidation. It's about inspiration. A young veteran who had lost both legs in Afghanistan rolled up to Razor. Never thought I'd ride again, he said, eyes moist. You guys, you gave me back more than just a bike. You gave me back hope. No, Razor responded, thinking about that night in the subway, about how close they'd come to taking a very different path. You guys gave us something more important. You gave us purpose. The morning news crew arrived early, setting up their equipment as the Road Warriors prepared for their first public demonstration. Local Channel 7's cameras focused on Miguel as he smoothly transferred from his wheelchair to his modified Sportster, demonstrating the seamless integration of the new control systems. "What you're seeing here is revolutionary," the reporter explained to her audience. "These adaptive modifications are giving disabled veterans a freedom they thought they'd lost forever." Razor, now comfortable in his role as program spokesperson, explained the technical aspects, while Joey and Chris demonstrated the safety features. The Steel Wolves, now regular volunteers, helped other veterans showcase their restored bikes. "This isn't just about motorcycles," Razor explained to the camera. "It's about dignity, independence, showing that disability doesn't mean the end of the road." David watched from Dr. Chen's office as 3 more news vans pulled into the parking lot. "Quite a change from 3 weeks ago," he remarked. "The governor's office called this morning," Dr. Chen replied, sorting through a stack of letters. "They want to feature the program in their Veteran Services Initiative. And look at these." She handed him a pile of emails. 15 motorcycle clubs from across the state, all wanting to start similar programs. The workshop floor had become a hub of activity. Chris was explaining his latest innovation to a group of engineering students from the local university. His street racing days seemed like a distant memory as he detailed the mathematical principles behind their adaptive control systems. "The key was understanding that each rider's needs are unique," he explained, his former rebellious attitude replaced by professional confidence. "We're not just adapting bikes, we're customizing solutions for individual challenges." A commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. A group of corporate executives in suits entered, led by the CEO of a major motorcycle manufacturer. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Chen announced, "meet our new partners. They're here to discuss taking our adaptive technology nationwide." The executives moved through the workshop, clearly impressed by what they saw. They stopped at Miguel's bike, watching as he demonstrated the seamless operation of the controls. "This is beyond anything our R&D department has developed," the CEO admitted. "We want to mass-produce these systems, make them available to disabled riders everywhere." Razor looked at his team, seeing in their faces the same mix of pride and humility he felt. "One condition," he said to the executives. "Every system has to be adaptable. No one-size-fits-all solutions. Each rider's needs are different." "That's exactly why we're here," the CEO replied. "We don't just want your technology, we want your expertise, your understanding of what riders really need." As the meetings continued, Joey led another group of veterans through their basic maintenance class. The sight of the formerly aggressive biker patiently teaching disabled veterans had become normal, but it still made David smile. "You know what's really amazing?" Joey said during a break. "Remember how we used to think respect came from making people fear us? Now we're earning real respect, just by helping others." The afternoon brought more visitors, representatives from VA hospitals in other states, eager to learn how to replicate the program. They watched as the Road Warriors worked, noting how seamlessly the former gang members interacted with veterans, medical staff, and engineers. "The key," Razor explained to them, "is understanding that everyone has value. These bikes don't just repair themselves. Every person here, whether they're a veteran, a former troublemaker, or a kid who used to race illegally, they all bring something important to the table." Miguel rolled up to join the conversation. "Show them the training program," he suggested. Razor led them to a corner of the workshop where new volunteers were learning the basics of adaptive modification. The Steel Wolves worked alongside engineering students, each teaching the other different aspects of the work. "See, that's what makes this special," Razor explained. "We're not just fixing bikes. We're building bridges between communities that never would have connected otherwise." The day wound down with a test run of all the bikes that would participate in the upcoming parade. The sound of engines filled the air as veterans, many who thought they'd never ride again, took their restored machines for a spin around the parking lot. David stood with Dr. Chen, watching the scene. "You know," he said, "when I suggested community service that night, I never imagined it would lead to this." "Sometimes," she replied, "people just need to be shown a different path. Your father would be proud of what you started here." As the sun set, the road warriors gathered for their daily debrief. The corporate executives had left with contracts to review, the news crews with their stories, but the real work continued. "Tomorrow we start on 10 new bikes," Razor announced, "and we've got 5 new clubs coming to learn our methods. Remember where we started, but focus on where we're going." The workshop lights dimmed, but the spirit of transformation that had begun in a subway station continued to grow, touching more lives with each passing day. 5 days before the Veterans Day parade, the workshop buzzed with unprecedented energy. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows, glinting off 50 perfectly restored motorcycles lined up for final inspections. Each bike told a story, not just of mechanical restoration, but of personal transformation. "CBS News is here," Dr. Chen announced, watching a network van pull into the parking lot. "They're doing a national feature on the program." Razor adjusted his Road Warriors vest, now adorned with service patches and recognition pins from various veterans organizations. The nervous energy in his stance reminded David of that night in the subway, but for entirely different reasons now. "Remember," David advised, "just tell them the truth. Tell them how a fight that didn't happen led to a movement that did." The workshop had been transformed for the media event. Before and after photos lined the walls, showing the progression of both bikes and people. The old Night Riders patch hung beside current photos of the Road Warriors, teaching, working, and changing lives. "What strikes me most," the CBS reporter observed, walking through with her camera crew, "is how organic this feels. This isn't just a repair shop." She stopped at a station where Chris, the former street racer, was demonstrating his latest innovation, a computerized balance system that allowed triple amputee veterans to ride safely. His passion for speed had evolved into a passion for accessibility. "The technology is important," Chris explained to the camera, his former rebellious attitude replaced by articulate professionalism. "But it's the human connection that makes it work. Each rider has unique needs, unique challenges. We don't just modify bikes, we adapt them to individual stories." The camera panned to where Joey worked with a group of visiting bikers from 3 other states, teaching them the fundamentals of adaptive modification. The skull tattoo on his neck was now partially covered by a Veteran Support Specialist badge. "Look at the brake system here," Joey demonstrated, his voice carrying the authority of experience. "It's not about what the rider can't do. It's about reimagining what they can do differently." Miguel rolled through the shop, his Sportster gleaming beside him. The bike had become a symbol of the program's success, featured in magazines and technical journals. But it was Miguel's role as lead trainer that really showed what the Road Warriors had accomplished. "When I first came here," Miguel told the reporter, "I thought my riding days were over. These guys didn't just give me back my bike, they gave me back my purpose. Now I get to help others find theirs." The Steel Wolves, now regular volunteers, worked alongside engineering students from 3 universities. The mixture of street knowledge and academic expertise had produced innovations that impressed even veteran motorcycle manufacturers. "See how the gyroscopic stabilizer integrates with the neural response system?" a professor explained to the camera. "This is graduate-level engineering being developed by former gang members and street racers. It's revolutionary." Dr. Chen led the camera crew to her office, where walls were covered with letters from across the country. "We're receiving requests daily," she explained. "Veteran groups, rehabilitation centers, even correctional facilities, they all want to know how to replicate this program." The reporter paused at a framed photograph showing the moment when everything changed, a still from the subway security camera capturing David and the Night Riders in their confrontation. Beside it hung the citation from the police department, commending David's decision to seek rehabilitation over punishment. "That night," Razor told the camera, standing beside the photo, "we thought we were tough guys. We thought respect came from fear. Staff Sergeant Torres could have shown us what real tough looks like, but instead, he showed us what real strength is. Outside, a thunder of motorcycles announced the arrival of more supporters. 300 bikers from clubs across the state roared into the parking lot, many wearing Road Warrior support patches. They came carrying donations, tools, and offers to help expand the program. "This is bigger than us now," David observed, watching the crowd gather. "It's becoming a movement." The camera crew captured scenes of veteran riders testing their adapted bikes, each success story adding to the program's impact. A former Marine who lost both legs in Afghanistan executed a perfect figure-8 on his modified Harley. A blind veteran rode confidently in a specially designed sidecar, helping others understand the navigation system he and Chris had developed. "For the Veterans Day Parade," the reporter asked, "how many modified bikes will be participating?" 50 riders, Razor answered proudly. Each one told they'd never ride again, each one proving that limitation is just an invitation to innovate. The afternoon brought more visitors, representatives from motorcycle manufacturers, adaptive technology companies, and veterans organizations. They watched as the Road Warriors conducted their daily training session, teaching new volunteers the delicate balance of technical skill and personal understanding. "The hardware is important," Joey explained to a group of corporate executives, "but the real magic is in understanding each rider's journey. These aren't just customers, they're warriors finding their way back to what they love." As the sun began to set, David found Razor in the workshop office, studying applications from other motorcycle clubs wanting to join the program. The stack of papers was thick with possibility. "You know," Razor said without looking up, "that night in the subway, when you had every right to hurt us, you saw something we couldn't see in ourselves." "I saw potential," David replied, "just like my father would have. He always said the measure of a warrior isn't in the fights they win, but in the lives they change." The evening ended with a tradition that had evolved over the weeks. The Road Warriors gathered in a circle, sharing stories of progress and challenges. Veterans spoke about rediscovered freedom, volunteers about found purpose, and former adversaries about transformed perspectives. "Tomorrow's the final preparation for the parade," Razor announced. "But remember, the parade is just a demonstration of what happens here every day. Real victory isn't in the show we put on, it's in the lives we help rebuild." The workshop lights dimmed, but the spirit of what had grown there continued to shine. From a moment of potential violence had come a movement of definite peace, proving that sometimes the most powerful changes come not from throwing punches, but from extending hands. As the camera crew packed up their equipment, the reporter made one final observation. This story began with bikers messing with the wrong veteran, but in the end, maybe they messed with exactly the right one, someone who could see beyond the surface to the potential beneath. David looked around the workshop one last time before leaving. His father's picture hung on the wall of honor, surrounded by photos of transformed lives and restored dreams. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest battles are won not by fighting, but by showing others a better way to be strong. Veterans Day dawned clear and crisp, the morning sun glinting off rows of polished motorcycles lined up outside the VA hospital workshop. 50 restored bikes, each one representing countless hours of work and transformation, stood ready for their moment in the national spotlight. Miguel, dressed in his Marine dress blues from the waist up, made final adjustments to his Sportster's controls. The bike had become a symbol of the program's success, its adaptive technology featured in engineering journals and veterans magazines. "Nervous?" David asked, approaching in his own dress uniform. "Not about riding," Miguel replied, smiling. "Just hoping we show people what's really possible when you give someone a chance." The Road Warriors arrived together, their leather vests now adorned with service patches and their new logo, a phoenix rising from a motorcycle wheel. Razor led them, the American flag mounted on his bike catching the morning light. "Final checks, everyone," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of earned respect rather than intimidation. "We're not just riding for ourselves today." Chris, wearing a Road Warriors trainee vest over his dress shirt, moved through the formation with his tablet, verifying each bike's adaptive systems. The former street racer had found his calling in creating technology that changed lives. "All systems green," he reported. "Every bike's reading perfect." News crews from major networks set up their cameras along the parade route. The story of the Road Warriors had caught national attention, becoming more than just a local human interest piece. This was about transformation on a larger scale. "Look who's here!" Joey called out, pointing to approaching motorcycles. The rumble of engines grew as hundreds of bikers from across the country rolled in. Clubs that once would have been rivals now wore Road Warriors support patches. Among them were other veterans groups who had started similar programs in their own cities. Dr. Chen emerged from her office, carrying a surprise. "Before we head out," she announced, "there's something you should see." She unveiled a large framed document, official recognition from the Department of Veterans Affairs, acknowledging the program as a national model for rehabilitation and community service. "This isn't just about today's parade," she continued. "Thanks to you, 20 other VA hospitals are launching similar programs. What started in a subway station is becoming a nationwide movement." The Steel Wolves, now regular volunteers, helped position cameras on several bikes to document the ride. Their leader, once a notorious troublemaker, now wore a vest identifying him as a program instructor. "Remember that night," he said to Razor, "when we first heard about what happened in the subway? Never thought we'd end up here." Sergeant Ramirez arrived with a police escort detail. "Streets are cleared for the formation," she reported. "You've got green lights all the way to the parade route." The morning air filled with the sound of engines as 50 adapted motorcycles roared to life. Each one represented a different story. A triple amputee using Chris's new control system, a blind veteran with a specialized audio guidance setup, warriors who had thought their riding days were over. David took his position at the front of the formation alongside Miguel. Behind them, Razor carried the American flag, flanked by Joey and the other Road Warriors. The rest of the formation stretched back, veterans, volunteers, and supporters, all united in purpose. "Remember," Razor called out over the intercom system they'd installed in all the bikes, "smooth and steady. Show them what we've built here." The procession moved out, 50 adapted motorcycles followed by hundreds of supporters. As they turned onto Main Street, the crowd's reaction was immediate. People lined the sidewalks, many holding signs supporting the program. "Look at their faces," Miguel said through the intercom. "They're not seeing disabilities anymore. They're seeing possibilities." The parade route took them past the subway station where it all began. David couldn't help but reflect on how a moment of potential violence had transformed into something so powerful. The security camera that had captured that confrontation now recorded a very different scene. Hundreds of bikes rolling past in formation, led by former adversaries turned allies. Television cameras captured the precision of the formation as it moved through downtown. Each rider demonstrated complete control of their adapted machines, proving that disability didn't mean inability. The Road Warriors rode proudly alongside their students, their transformation from troublemakers to mentors clear in their bearing. At the review stand, military officials and civic leaders stood in respect as the formation passed. The announcer's voice carried over the speakers, telling the story of the program's origin and its impact on veterans' lives. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "what you're witnessing isn't just a parade. This is American innovation, community transformation, and the power of second chances, all rolling past you on two wheels." The formation executed a perfect series of maneuvers, demonstrating the capabilities of their adapted machines. Miguel led a group of disabled veterans through complex patterns, showing that their challenges hadn't limited their abilities. As they completed the parade route, more bikes joined the procession. What had started as 50 riders grew to nearly 1,000, clubs from across the country showing solidarity with the program's mission. The day concluded back at the workshop, where donors and supporters had gathered. Corporate executives stood alongside former gang members, all united in their commitment to expanding the program. "This is just the beginning," Dr. Chen announced to the gathered crowd. Today we showed what's possible. Tomorrow we start working on making it probable for every veteran who wants to ride again. David found Razor standing by Miguel's bike, both men watching the celebration unfold. "You know," Razor said quietly, "that night in the subway, we thought we were tough guys. But this, helping others find their strength, this is what real tough looks like." Miguel nodded, running his hand along his bike's custom controls. "Sometimes the hardest battles aren't the ones we fight against others. They're the ones we fight against our own limitations." As the sun set on Veterans Day, the workshop remained full of energy and purpose. Plans were already underway for expansion, for reaching more veterans, for transforming more lives. "Staff Sergeant," Razor called out as David prepared to leave, "thank you. Not for what you could have done to us that night, but for what you helped us become instead." David looked around the workshop, at the lives changed and the bridges built. "Sometimes," he replied, "the greatest victory isn't in winning a fight. It's in knowing how to turn a moment of conflict into a lifetime of purpose." The day ended with the thunder of motorcycles as riders departed, carrying the spirit of the program back to their own communities. What had begun as a confrontation in a subway station had become a movement of transformation, proving that sometimes the wrong people to mess with turn out to be exactly the right ones to change your life. The week after the Veterans Day parade brought changes that nobody could have predicted. The workshop had been transformed into a national training center with representatives from 20 VA hospitals across the country learning the Road Warriors methods. Razor stood before a group of former gang members from Detroit, Chicago, and Los Angeles, all sent by their local VA hospitals to learn the program. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who once terrorized a subway station was now teaching others how to change lives. "First rule," he explained, gesturing to the workshop floor where Miguel was teaching adaptive riding techniques. "Forget everything you think you know about respect. Real respect isn't taken. It's earned by giving it to others." Chris moved between workstations, explaining the technical aspects of their newest innovations. His street racing expertise had evolved into groundbreaking adaptive technology designs that were revolutionizing the industry. "The neural interface connects here," he demonstrated to a group of engineers from the VA's research division. "But the real breakthrough isn't in the technology, it's in understanding each rider's unique needs." Dr. Chen watched from her new office, recently expanded to accommodate the program's growth. On her desk lay contracts from 3 major motorcycle manufacturers, all wanting to mass-produce the Road Warriors' adaptive designs. Beside them sat a more important document, approval for federal funding to expand the program nationwide. "We never saw this coming," she said to David, who had stopped by between his regular duties. "What started as community service has become a national movement." Joey was in the testing area, working with a quadriplegic veteran who had never imagined riding again. The custom sip and puff control system they'd developed was drawing attention from medical technology companies. "Easy on the pressure," Joey instructed, his once intimidating presence now radiating patience and understanding. "The bike responds to your breath like it's part of your body. That's it. Perfect control." The veteran's face lit up as the motorcycle responded to his commands. Around him, other riders worked with their adapted machines, each one representing a different challenge overcome. The Steel Wolves, now full-time program instructors, led a group of visiting bike club leaders through their training protocol. Their patches, once symbols of fear, had been replaced with instructor credentials. "Your reputation on the street doesn't matter here," their leader explained. "What matters is your ability to understand and serve. We're not building machines. We're rebuilding lives." A commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. A group of young men in military uniforms entered, newly wounded warriors from Walter Reed Hospital, sent to see what was possible in their recovery. Razor approached them, recognizing the look of uncertainty in their eyes. He'd seen it before, in every veteran who thought their riding days were over. "Welcome to your new beginning," he said, leading them to where Miguel was demonstrating advanced riding techniques. "Everything you see here started because someone believed in second chances." The young warriors watched in amazement as Miguel executed complex maneuvers on his adapted Sportster. Their expressions transformed from doubt to hope as they realized what was possible. 2 months ago, Miguel told them, I thought I'd never ride again. These guys didn't just give me back my bike, they gave me back my purpose. Now it's our turn to do the same for you. The workshop had become a hub of innovation. Engineering students worked alongside former gang members, each bringing their unique perspectives to solving complex challenges. The combination of street knowledge and academic expertise had produced results that surprised even veteran designers. See how the stabilization system integrates with the rider's natural movement? Chris explained to a visiting prosthetics expert. We learned this from watching how different riders compensate for their injuries. Every limitation became an opportunity to innovate. David observed the activity from the mezzanine level they'd added to accommodate the growing program. The sight of former rivals working together, of barriers breaking down between communities that once feared each other, made him think of his father's words about true strength. Sergeant Ramirez arrived with another group, police officers from departments nationwide, interested in implementing similar rehabilitation programs for troubled youth in their communities. Remember that night in the subway? She said to David. Who would have thought it would lead to this? The afternoon brought a special visitor, a senator who had heard about the program's success. He watched as veterans with various disabilities demonstrated their riding skills, each adaptation showcasing American ingenuity and determination. This isn't just about motorcycles, Razor explained to him. It's about showing people that their limitations don't define them. It's about transformation of machines, of lives, of communities. The senator observed a training session where former gang members taught combat-wounded veterans how to operate their adapted bikes. The sight of one-time enemies working together for a common purpose wasn't lost on him. How many lives have you changed so far? He asked Dr. Chen. Directly? Over 200 veterans riding again, she replied. But indirectly, every former gang member who becomes an instructor, every engineering student who learns to see beyond disability, every community that witnesses transformation, the ripple effect is endless. As evening approached, the workshop prepared for its newest initiative, a night training program for working veterans. The lights blazed against the darkening sky as more bikes arrived. You know what's amazing? Joey said to David as they watched new riders master their adapted machines. That night in the subway, we thought we were the tough ones. Now we understand that real toughness isn't about fighting, it's about lifting others up. The day ended with a ceremony that had become tradition. New riders taking their first solo runs on adapted bikes. Each success was celebrated by everyone in the workshop, the cheers echoing off the walls. This is what victory really looks like, Razor told the visiting officials. Not defeating enemies, but creating allies. Not overcoming others, but helping them overcome their own challenges. As the last riders completed their training, David helped Miguel load his bike for the next day's demonstration. The workshop hummed with the energy of purpose found and lives changed. Sometimes, Miguel said, looking around at what they'd built, the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best possible outcomes. Who would have thought a subway confrontation would create all this? The lights dimmed, but the spirit of transformation burned brighter than ever. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new riders, new opportunities to prove that the greatest strength lies not in the power to destroy, but in the choice to build something better. The morning light streamed into the workshop as David and Razor prepared for their most ambitious undertaking yet, a cross-country tour to spread the message of the Road Warriors program. 50 stops in 50 days, each one an opportunity to change lives and challenge perceptions. Remember when this all seemed impossible? Razor asked, securing the last of the adaptive equipment into the custom trailer they'd designed. A bunch of former gang members teaching the country about second chances? David smiled, thinking back to that night in the subway. Impossible is just a starting point. It's what we build from there that matters. The tour buses arrived, each one wrapped with the Road Warriors logo and images of veterans regaining their freedom on adapted bikes. The entire workshop had turned out to see them off, a sea of leather vests, prosthetic limbs, and determined faces. Dr. Chen approached with a stack of papers. Last-minute requests, she said, handing them to Razor. Veterans groups in every city you're visiting, all wanting to learn from you. Razor flipped through the pages, his expression a mix of pride and humility. We're going to need a bigger workshop when we get back. Miguel rolled up, his Sportster gleaming in the morning sun. Bikes loaded and ready, he reported. Chris installed the new navigation system. Says we can't get lost even if we try. The cross-country team assembled. Razor and Miguel leading the riders, Joey and the Steel Wolves driving the equipment trucks, Chris managing the tech support bus. Each had been chosen not just for their skills, but for their stories, living proof of the program's impact. This isn't just a tour, David reminded them as they prepared to depart. This is a mission. Every stop, every demonstration, every person you meet. It's a chance to change a life. It's a chance to show the country what real strength looks like. The engines roared to life, a thunder of purpose and determination. The road ahead stretched out, a ribbon of possibility connecting cities and lives across the nation. Let's ride, Razor called out over the intercom. And with that, the road warriors set out to change the world, 1 mile at a time. The first stop was a small town in the heart of the Midwest, a community that had sent more than its share of young men and women to war. The main street was lined with flags and yellow ribbons, a silent testament to the sacrifices made. As the road warriors rolled in, the town seemed to hold its breath. Leather-clad bikers and gleaming adaptive motorcycles were an unusual sight in this traditional farming community. But as the riders dismounted and began unloading their equipment, something shifted. Curious onlookers became helpers, offering to carry boxes and set up displays. Children stared wide-eyed at the high-tech machines, their parents whispering explanations of words like adaptive and prosthetic. At the town hall, a crowd gathered, veterans of all ages, some in wheelchairs, some with canes, all with a glimmer of hope in their eyes. They had heard about the road warriors, had seen the news coverage of the Veterans Day parade. But seeing it in person, witnessing the possibilities firsthand, was something different entirely. Razor stepped to the microphone, his voice carrying across the hushed audience. "We're not here to tell you what you can't do," he began. "We're here to show you what you can do differently." He spoke of his own journey, from angry young man to leader, from taking to giving. He spoke of the power of purpose, of the strength found in serving others. As he spoke, the audience leaned forward, hanging on every word. These were their stories too, stories of loss and pain, but also of resilience and hope. Miguel took the stage, his Sportster a shining example of what was possible. He demonstrated the custom controls, the balance system, the freedom of the open road regained. In the crowd, an elderly veteran in a wheelchair wept silently. His wife squeezed his hand, whispering, You see what they can do?" The demonstrations continued, Chris showcasing the latest tech advancements, Joey sharing the therapeutic power of wrenching on an engine. Each display was a testament to ingenuity and determination, to the refusal to be defined by limitation. As the day wore on, the town came alive with a new energy. Veterans who had been isolated by their injuries found themselves surrounded by understanding and possibility. Family members saw a glimpse of the loved ones they thought they'd lost to trauma and despair. In a quiet corner of the town hall, a young man approached Razor. He was missing an arm, his face lined with the scars of war. "I never thought I'd ride again," he said softly. "I never thought I'd feel like myself again." Razor placed a hand on his shoulder, understanding in his eyes. "You're not alone," he said. "And you're not done. This is just the beginning." As the sun set on the first day of the tour, the road warriors packed up their equipment, preparing for the next leg of the journey. But they left behind more than just adaptive technology and inspiring words. They left behind a community transformed, a group of veterans and their families who had rediscovered hope and possibility. They left behind the seeds of change, the sparks of a movement that would grow with every mile, with every story shared. On the bus that night, as the miles stretched out behind them, David looked around at his team. They were laughing, sharing stories, planning for the next stop. They were united in purpose, in the knowledge that they were part of something bigger than themselves. This is just the beginning, he echoed Razor's words from earlier. This is how we change the world. One person, one community, 1 mile at a time. And as the bus rolled on through the night, the road warriors knew that they were riding towards a future where every challenge was an opportunity, where every limitation was an invitation to innovate, and where every person, no matter their struggles, had the chance to find their freedom on the open road. As the tour rolled into its second week, word of the Road Warriors' mission spread like wildfire. Local news stations clamored for interviews, community leaders requested private meetings, and at every stop, the crowds grew larger and more diverse. In a bustling city center, Razor found himself face to face with a group of skeptical reporters. They fired questions at him, their voices tinged with disbelief. "Aren't you just glorifying biker culture?" one asked, pen poised over his notebook. Razor shook his head, his expression patient. "We're not glorifying anything except the potential in every person. We're showing that your past doesn't have to define your future, that change is possible when you find a purpose bigger than yourself." Next to him, Miguel nodded in agreement. "I was a Marine," he said, his voice steady. "I served my country, and I lost my legs doing it. But I didn't lose my spirit. These bikes, this program, it's about reclaiming what we thought was lost. It's about finding a new way to serve." In the crowd, a woman in a wheelchair wiped away a tear. She had been a police officer, injured in the line of duty. She had come to the event skeptical, but now, seeing the possibilities in front of her, she felt a glimmer of the old fire reigniting in her heart. As the demonstration continued, Chris took center stage, explaining the intricacies of the adaptive technology. "It's not about making a one-size-fits-all solution," he said, gesturing to the array of customized bikes. "It's about understanding each individual's unique needs and finding innovative ways to meet them." In the audience, a group of engineering students furiously scribbled notes. They had come for extra credit, but now, seeing the real-world applications of their studies, they were buzzing with excitement. One of them, a young woman with a prosthetic arm, approached Chris after the presentation. "I want to help," she said simply. "I have ideas, ways we could make the controls even more responsive, the balance systems more intuitive." Chris grinned, recognizing the spark of innovation in her eyes. "Let's talk," he said. "We're always looking for fresh perspectives." As the day wore on, the Road Warriors found themselves in conversation with people from all walks of life. Doctors and therapists, engineers and entrepreneurs, all united by a common goal: to break down barriers and expand possibilities. In a quiet moment, Joey found himself speaking with a group of former gang members. They had come to the event wary, their tattoos and scars telling stories of lives lived hard. "I know what it's like," Joey said, his voice low. "To feel like the world's against you, like your only option is to fight. But there's another way, a way to use your skills, your smarts, your loyalty for something good, something that matters." The young men listened, their expressions shifting from guarded to thoughtful. They looked at the bikes, at the veterans laughing and sharing stories, and something clicked. "How do we get involved?" one asked, his voice gruff but hopeful. Joey smiled, remembering his own journey. "Let me show you," he said. As the sun began to set, the Road Warriors gathered for their nightly debrief. They were exhausted, but exhilarated, each buzzing with stories of the lives they'd touched, the connections they'd made. "This is bigger than us," Razor said, his eyes shining. "This is a movement, a revolution of the spirit." David nodded, thinking back to that fateful night in the subway. "It's about showing people that they have the power to change their own stories," he said, "that they're not defined by their worst moments, but by what they choose to do next." The team murmured in agreement, each lost in their own thoughts of the day's triumphs and challenges. They knew that the road ahead was long, that there would be setbacks and obstacles, but they also knew that they had each other, a brotherhood forged in shared purpose and unshakable belief. As they packed up their gear and prepared for the next leg of the journey, they did so with renewed energy and determination. They were the Road Warriors, and they were just getting started. Miles away, in a small town nestled in the mountains, a veteran sat in his workshop, tinkering with an old motorcycle carburetor. He had heard about the Road Warriors on the news, had seen the images of adapted bikes and triumphant riders. He looked down at his own legs, one flesh and blood, the other a prosthetic. He had lost it in Afghanistan, along with his sense of purpose and identity. He had come home a different man, angry and adrift, his dreams of riding again shattered like the bones in his leg. But now, seeing what was possible, feeling the old thrill of grease on his hands and the puzzle of machinery in front of him, he felt something stirring in his chest. It was small at first, a flicker of hope, a whisper of maybe. He reached for his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed the number that flashed on the screen. "Road Warriors," a voice answered, warm and welcoming. "How can we help you ride today?" The veteran took a deep breath, feeling the weight of possibility in his lungs. "I'm ready," he said. "I'm ready to find my way back to the road." And in that moment, he became part of something bigger, a community of warriors, each fighting their own battles, each finding their own way to healing and hope. He became part of the story of the Road Warriors, part of the tapestry of triumph and transformation that stretched across the country, 1 mile and one life at a time. As the Road Warriors tour entered its final week, the team found themselves in Washington, D.C., the heart of the nation's power and policy. They had been invited to speak at a congressional hearing on veteran affairs, to share their insights and experiences with the lawmakers who shaped the country's priorities. Razor stood at the podium, his voice ringing out across the marble halls. "We are here today not to ask for your pity," he said, his gaze steady and unwavering. "We are here to show you what is possible when you invest in the potential of our nation's heroes." Behind him, Miguel, Chris, and Joey stood tall, living embodiments of the program's success. They had each faced their own demons, had each found their way back to purpose and pride through the power of adaptive sports and community support. In the audience, senators and representatives leaned forward, their expressions ranging from curious to moved. They had heard countless testimonies over the years, had sat through endless hours of bureaucratic wrangling. But this was something different. This was raw and real, a story of transformation that transcended politics and party lines. As Razor spoke, his words painted a picture of a nation transformed, a nation where every veteran had the opportunity to reclaim their sense of self, where every person with a disability was seen not as a burden, but as a source of untapped potential. He spoke of the ripple effects, the families reunited, the communities strengthened, the economy boosted by a new wave of entrepreneurs and innovators. He spoke of a future where no one was left behind, where every person had the chance to contribute their unique gifts to the greater good. When he finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly at first, a ripple of applause began to build. It grew and swelled, a tsunami of support and solidarity that washed over the team, leaving them humbled and energized. In the days that followed, the Road Warriors found themselves in a whirlwind of meetings and interviews. They met with veteran service organizations, with disability advocacy groups, with technology firms eager to partner on the next generation of adaptive equipment. They shared their stories and their vision, planting seeds of change that would continue to grow long after they had returned home. They forged connections and collaborations, building a network of allies that stretched from coast to coast. And everywhere they went, they were met with an outpouring of support and gratitude. Veterans and their families, people with disabilities and their loved ones, all united by a common thread, the knowledge that they were not alone, that there was a community out there ready to embrace and empower them. As the tour drew to a close, the team gathered for one final rally in the heart of the capital. Thousands had come to hear them speak, to bear witness to the movement they had sparked. David took the stage, his voice thick with emotion. "When we started this journey," he said, "we had no idea how far it would take us. We had no idea the lives we would touch, the hearts we would change." He looked out over the sea of faces, each one a story of struggle and resilience. But now, looking out at all of you, I see a nation of warriors, a nation of survivors and thrivers, each fighting their own battles, each finding their own way to healing and hope. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. This is not the end of our journey, he said finally. This is just the beginning, because we are the Road Warriors, and our mission has only just begun. The crowd erupted in cheers, a roar of unity and determination that echoed across the National Mall. And in that moment, everyone present knew that they were part of something bigger, a movement that would continue to grow and evolve, touching lives and changing futures for generations to come. As the team packed up their gear for the final time, they did so with a sense of bittersweet accomplishment. They had set out to change lives, and in doing so, they had found their own lives transformed in ways they never could have imagined. They had forged unbreakable bonds of brotherhood and purpose, had discovered depths of strength and resilience they never knew they possessed. They had become not just a team, but a family united by a shared mission and an unshakable belief in the power of the human spirit. And as they rode off into the sunset, the open road stretching out before them, they knew that their journey was far from over. They had planted the seeds of change, had sparked a revolution of the heart and mind, and now it was up to them, and to all those they had touched along the way, to nurture those seeds, to watch them grow and flourish in the years to come. Back home, in the workshop where it all began, a new generation of road warriors was already hard at work. They were veterans and civilians, mechanics and engineers, each bringing their own unique skills and perspectives to the table. They were building on the foundation that David and his team had laid, expanding the program to reach even more people in need. They were developing new technologies, forging new partnerships, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And at the center of it all was the spirit of the Road Warriors, the spirit of resilience and hope, of community and connection. It was the spirit that had transformed a group of troubled bikers into a band of heroes, that had turned a moment of violence into a movement of healing. It was the spirit that lived on in every adapted bike, in every veteran's smile, in every life touched by the power of second chances. It was the spirit that would continue to ride on, mile after mile, heart after heart, until every person in need had found their way back to the open road. And so, the story of the Road Warriors became legend, a tale of redemption and renewal, of the unbreakable bonds of brotherhood and the unstoppable power of the human spirit. It was a story that would be told and retold, passed down from generation to generation, inspiring countless others to find their own paths to healing and hope. Because in the end, that was what the Road Warriors had always been about. Not just adapting bikes, but adapting lives. Not just rebuilding machines, but rebuilding souls. Not just changing the world, but changing themselves, 1 mile, 1 mission, 1 miracle at a time.